smartest people, the biggest ideas.
By now, most people know that the video game industry has overtaken the motion picture business and is well on its way to overtaking the television business in terms of its size, its scope, the budgets that are devoted to it, and in an interesting way, the way in which the video game industry is a throwback to the early days of the Hollywood studio system, in that there are houses, such as Electronic Arts, which is where Steve Rechtschaffner built his reputation and was creative director until very recently. These are organizations that actually have all their workers under one roof. They labor for a year or two or three to create a title and are working today with the budgets of major motion pictures. Steve, come up and tell us what's happening in the frenetic world of video games.
God, that's a long last name. Well, as my wife reminded me last night at about 11:45, well, she didn't remind me, she said, "What are you going to talk about?" All of a sudden, the light bulb went off over my head, and I thought, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because I'm in a transition in life. I was the creative director. I worked at Electronic Arts for 12 years. I made a lot of video games hands-on as a director, writer, producer, and I moved into a role where I worked with all the different studios around the world to help other people get new ideas off the ground. And I left that about 6 months ago. And I've been incredibly lazy. So, to the testament of our last speaker, I've been working on mastering my laziness. And I work in my bed in the morning until I always watch the Today Show. And then the show that comes on afterwards, I know it's time to get out of bed. So there I am, 12:05 a.m., staring into my Mac laptop, which I love that little camera on top because I can take little dumb pictures like that, which nobody else enjoys except me. Inspiration is probably the most important word in my life. It's taken me a long time to realize that, and it's taken me a long time to realize really the true value of inspiration. And I think I have 3 kids, 18, 16, and 14. And the one thing I try and talk to them a lot about is to value their inspiration. When I work with coworkers in the past who have a new idea and they pitch me, the first thing I say to them is, well, what inspired this idea? What was it that made you want to do this? Because somewhere there's something great that excited that person about whatever idea it is. And I've got a really simple philosophy, and it's probably different for everybody, and everything that you have to make or manufacture or create as your artistic expression or your commercial expression. But for me, something inspires you, and you move that towards being an idea. And in your head, all of a sudden, you have an idea. And then that idea, you start to think about it a little bit more, you start to put some weight on it, and it becomes a concept. And maybe it's a concept you can start to talk about with other people. Now, in making video games, this is challenging because the last few video games I made hands-on, I had between 100 and 150 people working on them by the time they were done. Now in my life, if I don't count my 2 pugs, nobody works for me. So I get an idea, I'll be out riding my bike, I'll get really inspired, I'll come home for an idea for a game, and there's nothing to do with it. I don't have concept artists, I don't have programmers to talk to, I don't have audio designers to bounce things off. And I've really come to realize that I am the absolute farthest thing from the auteur. I am a complete collaborator. Without collaboration, without other people, I'm just a useless 215-pound man. I listed these. I thought they'd keep me somewhat on course to talk about something that might be relevant to somebody besides me. So let me start with Greg Zace's basement. Most of you probably don't know Greg Zace. I went to high school with him in Chappaqua, New York. And it was 8th grade. And we were having a party at Greg's house in the basement, which was a really nice basement of a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And it was my first makeout party. So I was a bit nervous. I wasn't really very comfortable with women. I hadn't actually ever French kissed. I'd heard about it. And there was this one girl, Kathy Bergman, I really, really liked. So we're playing spin the bottle. I get Karen Hemberger. I get Karen's twin sister, Laura Hemberger. I never get Kathy Bergman. So finally I stand up in this moment of inspiration as I move it towards an idea, and I say, I got a new idea for a game. And everybody goes, oh, what is it? It's called Lights Out. Oh, what's that? Okay, all the guys on that side, all the girls on that side. I'm going to turn out the lights, you crawl to the middle, and whoever you bump into, you kiss. Okay, well, what do? I check out where Kathy Bergman is. Get lined up, turn out the lights, boom. Kathy Bergman, first French kiss. The realization, looking back, that somewhere within me was a desire to figure out how to make the world a little bit more fun, how to create a little bit of gamesmanship. So from that, I continued my miserable career as a high school student and barely made it out of high school. I actually made the mistake of putting my 4-year high school transcript up on the refrigerator at home. Somebody said to me, you know, you've had success in businesses, you've done different things. It might be a little daunting for your kids where they figure they can't do that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll show them where I was really a big failure. So I taped this thing up, and I've got D's and C minuses and F's. And unbeknownst to me, till my mom sent this to me, I flunked graphic arts. I can't tell you how many designers and visual artists I've expressed my opinion strongly to over the years that that piece of paper would have made their life. They think I'm being glib, and I'm saying, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. But what I'd like it to do is this. And that's the power of an idea.
I am amazed at the quality of interaction here. Absolutely love it.
I left high school with one desire. Well, two desires. One, I dreamed of being on Saturday Night Live as a writer. I don't know why. It was inspiring. It was the mid-60s, or 70s, sorry. I'm making all this up anyway. Steve couldn't be here today. The other thing I wanted to be was a hot dog skier. And the reason I wanted to be a hot dog skier is because you saw those pictures in the ski magazines, and you saw those ads on TV, and those are the coolest people I'd ever seen. You know, it was kind of the first extreme sport. It was kind of the first lifestyle sport that I've ever been exposed to. And it wasn't that I was a good skier. It wasn't that I was a great athlete. It's just I wanted to hang out with those people. So I became a hot dog skier. And eventually I qualified onto the World Cup Tour. Now, you might think, wow, aerials, moguls. I was not very coordinated. What I became was a ballet skier. Now, ballet skiing you probably aren't familiar with because they've killed it as an event. It doesn't exist. As freestyle moved on to the Olympics, they said, this one's dumb. And eventually my friend said, you know, you're not really that good a skier, but you're really good at getting sponsors. So why don't you help organize the team, and why don't you help it become an Olympic sport? So I quit competing. Luckily, that's where I met my wife, and she really is a good skier. We moved to New York. I had no job. Through a contest she was invited to, I met a guy starting a company called Swatch Watch. And they had a black watch. And I went up to him and I said, I've always wanted a black watch. The only black watch I've ever seen is the Porsche watch, and that's way too expensive. I'll never be able to afford that in my lifetime. And I said, hey, I got some ideas how you can market your company. 2 weeks later, I was working for him. And I spent the next 7 years as the creative director of Swatch Watch, which was really fun because, as every job I've had, I was completely unqualified for that job. And the beauty of that, and I actually wrote it up there, it's the beauty of being powerfully naive, and it's something I've tried to maintain in everything I do. I think it's a phenomenal advantage to come at things as an outsider. People always say to me in everything I do, wow, you're a really out-of-the-box thinker. Well, the truth is, I just don't know how to be in the box because I don't know how to do what they're doing. I came to video games. I'm meeting with programmers, you know, guys with math degrees and physics degrees and 12 years of, you know, 3D rendering, and they're talking about all sorts of stuff. They think I'm being glib, and I'm saying, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. But what I'd like it to do is this. And that's the power of an idea, because if you can describe what this is, and you can get people believing in this, and if you can wholeheartedly believe in that vision and believe in your intuition, because there's lots of people that will tell you no. You know, you always want to listen to feedback, but you want to measure the feedback. When I left that job, because it changed from a culture of yes to a culture of no, for me, my whole life's been in some form of companies or corporations. When a company moves from a culture of yes to a culture of no, that's when it's time for a guy like me to get out. So, art imitates life, imitates art. Okay, let me move forward into something practical. Probably the video game I'm most proud of that I did hands-on, and I can't say I, hundreds of people worked on it, but at some point I said, I've got an idea. And then it grew into something, and a bunch of other people made it a lot better and a lot more interesting. It was actually based on something that started years before. Myself and an old friend, Greg Stump, ski filmmaker, were doing segments for a TV show for Fox called World of Extremes. And we were one segment short. And our idea was we were shooting extreme sports, packaging our own little 7-minute piece and giving it to this really goofy show called The Ultimate Challenge, one of those funny stunt shows where like a guy drives through TVs on a motorcycle. And we were one episode short. And I said, you know, I've been thinking about this sport for a while. It's kind of like motocross, but I want to do it on snowboards. And so we were an episode short. The people in Blackcomb, British Columbia said they'd help us build the course. And we built a course and we filmed it, and we gave it a name and we called it Border Cross. And for fun, I built border cross courses for the next 2 or 3 years for people. It was never business for me. It was just a fun thing. And last year in Torino, Italy, it made its debut as an Olympic event, which shocked the hell out of me. But years later, as I'm making video games, I think, okay, it's gone as far as it can, or it's gone at a certain pace as a real sport. What could I do with it in a fictional world? So I had an idea to create a snowboard game. And the first time I pitched it, I stood in front of the board of directors and I said, I'm going to make a snowboard game that's not about snowboarding. And I had that look. It was the same look I got from the Swatch board of directors when I showed them the first commercial using the Fat Boys. And they just stared at the screen in this James Bond-like boardroom and they said, so, is this good? And I went, yes, it's very good. Excellent. You gotta love the Swiss. So, I don't know how many of you have seen many video games. I just took like the first 3-minute intro of the third iteration of SSX, which I think to date the SSX series has now sold over probably 11 million copies. If we could run the videotape, just a couple of minutes long.
You're tuned to Radio Big. I'm DJ Atomica, the eyes and ears of SSX for spectators and competitors alike. Broadcasting live from my nifty little sound booth with access to over 262 mountain cams. Some mountain info for those of you out riding today. Reports in from Peak 1's high alpine state that avalanche conditions have moved into the extreme. Riders are requested to use caution when venturing out into the backcountry. Peak 2 is experiencing the beginnings of storm-like conditions. Reports are coming in of strong winds throwing riders around and apparently beating up on some of the trees up there too. Watch yourselves, people. Just got off the phone with Peak 3 Ski Patrol. Sounds a bit dangerous up there. There's been a few sightings of crevices and big ice chunks breaking away. That's never good. You better be prepared. It's taken event organizers 2 years to turn this mountain into the ultimate SSX championship. Riders will be charging hard down these newly designed, never-before-seen racetracks where the terrain borders on the insane. New events like slopestyle will be pitting riders against a host of constructs, where competitors will snake the best lines through the wildest tracks to perform legendary tricks. Without a doubt, abilities will be pushed to the max in the big air events. Riders will be going harder and higher than anything seen before. This year's one-of-a-kind Super 5 events will be like no others. Riders are gonna have to throw it up huge to win these babies. SSX Big 9. You gotta love it.
See, that's what snowboarding would be like in my world. And that's the fun of video games, because you can take what's in your head and you can bring it to life. We needed to make the user believe, whether they'd ever snowboarded or not, that that's what they were doing.
IdeaCity is a place to go away from the spreadsheet and the annual report and the computer screen and all the technology and think.
One of the core values of building a good video game, and believe it or not, there's not a lot of good video games. I'm a video game player, and I buy a lot of games. And I'd say 1 out of every 10 really kind of grabs me and gets me excited. And one of the core things you have to do is you have to make people believe. And it's no different than being a writer. If you're writing fiction or if you're writing a screenplay, if you don't believe in the characters, if you don't believe in the story, it goes nowhere. And in a game like this, we spent 1.5 years working on the physics and the visual interaction and the sound interaction just with snowboarding. We needed to make the user believe, whether they'd ever snowboarded or not, that that's what they were doing. And when you went from powder to ice to hard pack, we needed that to translate using sound, using visuals, and the feeling through your controller. And once you believe that, or once you believe in the character of the game, because in this game, the mountain and the snow are the star, once you believe in that, then you can do all sorts of goofy stuff. You know, there's people jumping 300-foot caverns in there, and I watch people play the game, and they do that. They think they're jumping the cavern. As I mentioned, to build that game, it took probably 125 people, and we needed all new skill sets, because to get a visual look that really jumped out as something special, I had to go to Hollywood. And although it just really, really ticked off our art directors and our visual designers, I started reaching for people that had different skill sets. I started bringing in visual effects supervisors, Academy Award nominees and winners who had done some of the most cutting-edge stuff, who thought the video game space was an interesting place to spend their next few years. And one of the things I've always tried to do in every job I've had, I always try and work with people smarter than me. I try and work with people who are better artists, better writers, better technologists, because if it depended on my skill set, it would be a pretty crappy project. So you bring people in, and in a way, they embrace the concept of the powerfully naive. And what happens is they come at it with fresh new ideas, and they challenge the status quo, and they make people think differently. It doesn't necessarily mean you do exactly what they say, but they change the DNA of your organization, of your creative process. I was working with our LA studio on a game called Medal of Honor, and they're showing me a video, a rip-o-matic of all this footage. And it's got all this stuff from Black Hawk Down in it, and from Gladiator, and I watch the thing, and I get to the end. It's good to explain the editing style they want to use, and kind of the whole action and the visual look. And I said, well, you know, actually a friend of mine, Pietro, lives about 2 miles from here, and he edited both those movies. Let's bring him over. And they're like, what? What's he going to do? I said, I don't know. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. So we call him up, and he comes over, and he's just intrigued by this. He's intrigued by our attempt to do storytelling. He's intrigued by basic things we're not doing, that we don't know how to do, that we could easily do. And just in this hour-long conversation, to me, it's obvious there's this phenomenal new set of skills that we can apply. And yet, I walk away from that meeting, and I say to the producer, well, what do you think? He goes, I don't know what value he's going to add. He doesn't know games. And I thought, oh, my God, that's a symptom of the wrong way to do it. You have to be open to ideas. You have to be open to stretching your brain. You have to be open to new challenges if you're going to break through into new creative areas. I do my best work when nobody's paying attention. That's something I've learned. I don't know if that's true for other people. But at EA, at Swatch, propaganda film, all the stuff I did that I'm really proud of is stuff when nobody cared about it. The business was either too small, nobody paid attention. But once it became successful and once whatever it was became popular, then everybody started paying attention and everybody had input and everybody had insights and everybody wanted to define processes and go back and say, you know, how do we make this measurable? How do we spread it out? How do we... As soon as people start paying attention, my work goes downhill sharply. The island. This is the idea I thought of 2 weeks ago as I was riding my bicycle through West Vancouver. And I got together, and this is a very, very, very first sketch with a concept artist. But here's my fantasy, and here's what I think I'm going to build in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm going to build a world. It's probably going to be about 8 times that size. And it's going to be a place you can go to. You can go to after work. You can go to any time of the day. And it's going to feel like a physical island. And you can go there, and you can do all the sports that are some of the greatest sports in the world that nobody's ever done. Like windsurfing, like kite surfing, like big wave surfing. And it's going to be an island community. So as you're there, you'll be there with real people. It's going to be an entire world populated with real avatars from people all over the world. But as you discover the island, what you're going to discover is, unlike most games where it's about points or scoring that moves you through or money, some sort of commodity, what's going to be important here is social currency, being a good person, befriending locals, becoming part of the community. And that's where you'll discover the cool stuff on the island. That's how you'll get to the top of the mountain and get to hang glide down or find the really cool bike trails. And what I'm hoping is, instead of getting you all wound up and tense and freaked out when you're going and playing a game and shooting people or doing whatever, you go to a place that's beautiful, that's relaxing. You'll find a huge brand new waterfall one day and you can't wait to tell everybody about it and take your friends back there. So I'm inspired. It's, as you can see, it's not even an idea yet. It's just a point of inspiration, moving to an idea. It's far from a concept, but hopefully in 2 or 3 years you'll see it and I'll be working again and my wife will be the happiest person in the world. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Pleasure.
Get the latest Idealist news, presenter information, and watch streaming video at www.ideacityonline.com.